I had the pleasure of photographing a young dancer from Slovakia, Anna Sobolova. I will link to her Instagram feed below. She was visiting New York and we did a photo session with her using New York as a backdrop because, you know what, she's visiting New York and hey, it's New York. New York is quite a big deal. I got some really nice photographs. Well, I should say we got some really good photographs because it's most definitely reliant on her talent as well to get some striking images. Hi, I'm Neil van Niekerk. With this video, we're going to discuss camera settings, flash settings, how it came together, balancing the two to get good photographs out in location. Looking at the main image here, well, it starts off with the background. What does the background look like? My framing, my composition. That is just as important as camera settings and flash settings. We need to be looking at the wider picture as such to make sure that we're on our road to getting a good image, a really successful photograph. When I work with a dancer, I always ask for them to give me one or two examples of the movement, the extent of the range of the movement, so I have an idea of the framing. I need to be able to anticipate that and also anticipate the peak moment. I will do a test shot, maybe even without flash, just so I can see, is this the position of the hands and the feet where my timing should coincide with her intent or their intent of what should be the ideal image. So definitely one or two images, one or two takes where I look at the range of the movement. In relation, of course, to, as I mentioned, the composition, the background. And then I have to decide about my settings. Now back to this image. Looking at the pullback shot, you'll see where my assistant was holding up a flash and softbox. The flash I used for this photo session was the ProPhoto B10X. 250 watt seconds, fairly powerful, they are more powerful, but it is lightweight, really compact. So it's easy enough for my assistant to hold up for an extended time. And then the light modifier that I used was a collapsible 1x4 softbox, also by ProPhoto. They expand and collapse really quickly. There's a little handle here, let me see if I can show you. A little handle here that you clip the softbox open, and then there's the mount for the flash to fit in. Really compact. The reason why I chose a rectangular, narrow strip box instead of a round or larger softbox was that we're going to walk around people, and with previous sessions I've climbed upstairs, go through small doorways, you never know where you're going to end up. The other advantage is we're thinking of this as a narrow strip box, but rotating it, we get a very wide light as well. Being able to rotate the strip box makes it very versatile because you can always angle it, bring one end a little closer, further away. I find this is really a much more versatile softbox than a round or square softbox. I can do a lot more with it. And again, portable and narrow, and then as easily as this expanded into a larger, proper softbox, clip, and it collapses and it fits into a nice, compact carry bag. So my favorite strip box, softbox for working out in location for photo sessions like this. Looking at the pullback shot, you can see my assistant holding up the light. My camera settings, 1000th at 2.8, 160 ISO. The fast shutter speed of 1,000th of a second allowed me to freeze the action. Because we can't rely on flash to freeze the action because we're balancing flash and ambient light. So enough ambient light will exist in the photograph that you get subject movement, you get subject smear. So we need the high shutter speed to freeze the action. With that, we went into a high-speed flash sync. But there's more to it. Why didn't I use a neutral density filter? Because very often if you need to balance flash and bright daylight, you go to a neutral density filter to work at maximum sync speed, that you don't use a deeper f-stop with more depth of field. You want a very shallow depth of field to throw the background out of focus. The reason why I didn't use a neutral density filter is exactly because I needed the fast shutter speed. 2/50th wouldn't have been fast enough to freeze the action, even though my timing is for peak moment. I needed a fast shutter speed. So no neutral density filter, had to be high-speed flash sync. Looking at the behind the scenes or the pullback shot, you'll see that my assistant is a specific distance from my subject. That's consistent, because remember, flash exposure is dependent on four things. PAID, P-A-I-D, power, aperture, ISO, distance, PAID. Four things. Not shutter speed while you work below maximum sync speed. But the moment you go into high-speed sync, Shutter speed becomes a linear control of your flash exposure. There's a link here down below to another video where I explain and talk about high-speed flash sync, and it'll show it very clearly. So if I get correct exposure at 1,000th f4, I can very easily just go 2,000th 2.8 without having to recalculate my flash exposure. There's a linear thing happening here. So my method here was, because I'm battling strong daylight in the background and I want a fast shutter speed, as fast a shutter speed as possible, I go to full power on my flash. So my power is dictated for me. My aperture is dictated for me. I wanted 2.8. I wanted to blur the background as much as possible. ISO as low as possible. We have a bit of flexibility there. And the distance is whatever gives us proper exposure, BAID. And the shutter speed comes in as well. So again, I went to maximum output on my flash. It means that I have one shot at a time. I can't shoot ding, 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 couple of images. My timing has to be correct. So I work at a specific distance. We do a test shot or two. I don't measure my flash. We're working out in the streets on Manhattan, and it's just simpler to guess what I need to do. But remember, the exposure is consistent. If you have 1,000th f4, you have 2,000, 2.8, you have 500, 5.6. You have that linear control. So if you work with this often enough, with a specific flash and a softbox, you know that you'll get consistent exposure at a certain distance. So you kind of have to do your homework beforehand. You have to do a bit of testing. You kind of have to have an idea of the distance that you will get for a specific setting. So with that, I kind of knew the approximate distance that I would position my subject, the dancer, and then have my assistant stand and hold the softbox. And then I would tell my assistant closer, further back, higher up, etc. as I took test shots. Here's a behind-the-scenes video of my actual position.
Stacey, pull back a little bit.
And that's how it all came together very consistently, that I could shoot a number of photographs. Here's a quick screen capture of Bridge. Well, I use Bridge, old school still, instead of Lightroom. But a screen capture where you can see a number of photographs. I knew the distance, we knew the power, and I could take several shots, one after each other, trying to get that peak moment. And after about 8, 9, 10 shots, I would show the dancer if we have something in our pocket. Do we have at least 2, 3 shots that are absolute peak, that are exactly what she wants? And if she says yes, we move on to something else. So just for interest, let me show another photograph. My settings here, 1/3200, a really fast shutter speed, at 3.5, at 500 ISO. Nearly wide open, but I wanted to give myself a little bit of play, but the shutter speed is fast because we need to freeze the action. And then my ISO is appropriate to give me proper exposure. Now notice in this instance, she's in the sunlight, and the direction of light came that hit her from the front. Very purposeful use of available light. She's not in the shadow area. I wanted the punchy light, and I wanted her in relation to the more muted tones of the background down Fifth Avenue. So with this video, I hope I gave some insight in the choice of settings, but also the thought process, that there is kind of an algorithm there to help me work faster. And it becomes second nature that I don't have to stand there and not get any traction, that I start spinning my wheels. And it has to be decisive. Things fall into place, as I said, with this kind of algorithm, with a bit of experience, with a bit of practice. And then it really looks fantastic when you have a fantastic subject. If you have any questions or comments, please, you know what to do.